much bigger. So we got more of a crowd.
Thank you. Good afternoon and namaste everyone. On behalf of HinduACTion and the Shalom Namaste Multi-faith Coalition, we welcome you to our Congressional Briefing on anti-Semitism and rising anti-Hinduism in the United States and against other minority communities who do not have a representative voice. On this date, October 23rd, 2023, we are coming together to recognize and stand up for the rights and protections of groups that have been marked for erasure, disenfranchisement, and accusations of apartheid here in America. Today, the institutions that were once bastions of free speech, courage, and open dialogue have been hijacked by ideological extremists that choose to stifle the voice of minority groups like the Jewish community, the Hindu community, Muslim, Hazara, Bora, Ahmadiyas, Yazidis, Sikhs, and other minority groups. Couched in an elegant vocabulary of social justice causes, these groups perpetuate and propagate a nefarious agenda that seeks to undermine the basic rights of Hindus, Jews, and other citizens who take a stand against terrorism and jihad. We saw, as the tragedy of the terror attacks by Hamas on Israel unfolded on October 6th and 7th, the dehumanization of the Israeli people by those that claim to be the fighters of freedom for the Palestinian cause. Across the social media spectrum, we have had terror apologists downplaying, denying, and sometimes even celebrating the grotesque defilement of women and children after they have been raped and murdered by these cold-blooded terrorists. The people supporting the terror attacks on Israel align with or are supported by pan-Islamist groups such as the Jamaat-e-Islami, the Muslim Brotherhood, and others, and they operate in Western democracies with foreign support from countries like Qatar, Turkey, and Pakistan. To lend credibility to their extremist rhetoric, they have hijacked social justice causes such as the LGBTQ rights, Black Lives Matter, the causes of illegal immigrants and refugees, and climate activism. They have captured spaces in academia, in influential mainstream media such as Washington Post and New York Times, and in television networks such as MSNBC, CNN, BBC, and others. And they have unleashed a disproportionate campaign of stochastic terrorism against Jewish voices, and they are often spreading misinformation and disinformation with little or no accountability. It is not surprising that over the past decade, the same group that targets Jews in US and Canada and other parts of the Western world also target and spread anti-Hindu bigotry. It manifests as gaslighting, intimidation, victim shaming, and outright denial of our ability to grieve the loss of life within our own communities. Together, along with the actual terrorists, the network of terror apologists continue to create unsafe environments for Hindus and Jews and other communities across the United States and across the world, continuously accusing us of apartheid, genocide, and other things. Their actions have culminated in people losing their jobs, being doxxed, and feeling intimidated and unable to speak out. You will hear from within our own Hindu community a story from one such victim today. Today's congressional briefing will highlight only a small portion of what is currently evolving in the American landscape as we try to protect life, liberty, and justice for all, and take a stand against extremism, terrorism, and jihad. With this opening statement, I would request all of you to stand, and we will observe a minute of silence for the departed souls of the terror attack on Israel. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. So I would just like to have a pause. I believe we have a representative from Congressman Sherman's office. Okay. Thank you for coming. Our first speaker, I have the honor of introducing Ms. Asra Nomani. Ms. Asra Nomani is a Muslim reformist and a former Wall Street Journal correspondent, and has written for the Washington Post, the New York Times, Slate, the American Prospect, and Time. She was a correspondent for Salon.com in Pakistan after 9/11. She was a visiting scholar at the Center for Investigative Journalism at Brandeis University. She has recently written a book called The Woke Army that will shed some light on the unfolding events in America today. Ms. Asra Nomani, please. Everybody, please give a warm welcome to
Thank you all for this invitation to speak before you. There was a day, January 23rd, 2002, that I wished nobody in this world would ever experience. But the world saw the tragedy that I experienced on that day in infinite proportion on October 7th, 2023. On January 23rd, 2002, my colleague and friend from the Wall Street Journal, a man by the name of Daniel Pearl, left my home in Karachi, Pakistan, for an interview from which he was supposed to just return home, but he never came back. And in the days that ensued, we discovered that the men who kidnapped Danny first justified his kidnapping by saying he was an American, and thus he naturally worked for the CIA. And then the story came out that Danny was Jewish, and the story changed then. And Danny was now an agent for Mossad. It was a death sentence. And indeed, weeks later, we discovered with the world a terrorist porn video, you could call it, documenting Dear Danny's murder. And what did they do? They not only killed my friend, but they took a knife to his throat and then held his head like a trophy, justifying their brutality with this notion that they had divine protection. Because what I learned then was that the men who kidnapped and then murdered Danny washed the floor of the blood, lay down their prayer rugs, pointed it to Mecca, and blessed this heinous act. What I saw in that video was something that I hoped nobody would ever have to see again. But now we have seen it again. Everything has changed over these 20 years since Danny's murder, but nothing has changed. Now we've seen the weapon of the camera used to document the killing of babies, the kidnapping of young teens, and the slaying of the elderly. Why does that matter to us? It matters because what I discovered then, in the 21 years since Danny's murder, is that there is this network that exists. I call it the woke army. And this woke army is the far left, organizations that are amongst us, and then the Islamists. I am a Muslim. I'm a Muslim feminist. I'm a Muslim reformer. Nothing of what the men who killed Danny or the terrorists who slayed young people in Israel have done is anything of the Islam that my parents taught me. The Islam that my parents taught me is an Islam of grace. But what we have seen now over this 21 years is that Islamist organizations, funded indeed by governments from Saudi Arabia to Qatar to Turkey, Iran, they have now found a foothold in the United States using the very freedoms that we enjoy and honor to enter our country and try to destroy our freedoms. I wouldn't be able to speak to you with such conviction, except I went on Saturday to a protest of these Muslim organizations with these hard left organizations. They started at that sacred place that's the Washington Monument, a symbol of America's freedoms. And there the chant began, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. What is the river? It's the Jordan River. What is the sea? It's on the west coast of Israel. And what is in between? Jewish families, Jewish lives, Jewish children. So for that land to be claimed, you have to remove the Jewish people. And what I saw in a mile and a half of a march from the Washington Monument to the US Capitol were the leaders of this woke army. And I went to each one of them and I said, do you condemn the terrorist acts of Hamas? Do you condemn the killing of innocents? And my experience is a metaphor for the reality of what we face today. Because there, one of the leaders, a woman by the name of Linda Sarsour, who organized the Women's March in the United States, turned then to her security detail. And who was her security detail? None other Then a young man, his earrings glittering in the sunshine, and he had 3 initials on his vest. And what did those initials say? DSA. What did the back of his jacket say? Democrat Socialists of America. So here in the streets of Washington, D.C., our freedoms were hijacked by people who didn't even want to allow me to be able to exercise my freedoms. And I turned to that young man and I said, is this the Islamic State of Gaza? Because what is happening today is that these autocrats, these tyrants that have impacted every single one of your lives here today, in one form or another, they are trying to exercise their power even more in the world. And so we are going to hear today from the Hazara community. We are going to hear from the Indian Hindu community. We are going to hear from the Jewish community. What is it that connects each one of us? We have all come in the crosshairs of the woke army. And this woke army will come for anyone and everyone, because ultimately their goal is power and control. And if you dare to challenge it, they will stand in your way. My final message to all of you is simply the one that everybody here lives with, is harness the moral courage within yourself. See the fear that you feel. You do feel fear, I understand. You may have a tremble in your heart. Acknowledge and see that fear, and then transcend it. Transcend it with the spirit of whatever it is that your ancestors gave you for power and for vision. And together, I can assure you, we will defeat the woke army. We will do it from a place of love and humanity. And I am honored to be amongst all of you in this endeavor, and we will prevail. Thank you.
Opening with such words of courage and inspiration, thank you, Elena Straji. As we go into the next session, I'd like to introduce Hoon Kim. Hoon is a strategic expert on China and Chinese influence in the Middle East and the rest of the world. Hoon will introduce our next 3 speakers on the panel. And Hoon, please.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me in this this very historic, but I would say I wish we didn't see the need for something like this, because in a sense the threat is faced by all of us. And before I introduce our speakers today, I would like to share briefly why myself and my colleagues are involved in this issue. You might be wondering why are we doing this in the middle of Congress on a Monday, full of folks who we're not Jewish, right? Why have we organized this together? Well, the reason is very simple. It's because we stand for humanity. It's because that's the values that we're taught to all of us, whether we're Christians like myself, whether we're Hindus, whether we're Buddhists, whether we're Muslims, Shia or Sunni. But more importantly, we do this because we believe somewhere deep down in our hearts that our Creator wants us to stand together no matter what happens. Lastly, when it comes to Israel, I was actually in Rochester when the news hit about the attack on the Israeli civilians, and it got me wondering, is this just going to be like another 2014 or 2021? And to my horror, and to all of your horrors as well, it ended up being a lot worse. We've heard the reports of women, there was rapes, kidnapping of children. I myself have heard a story where a family was held hostage and a terrorist put his gun on the head of the child in front of their parents. Now, some of my friends who are quote-unquote pro-Palestine would come up to me and say, well, that's something that Israel's been doing to our people or the Palestinians for, for God knows how many years. And my response to them is this, is that, well, look, if even if that's your core belief, even if that's something that you hold dearly, is it still right? And I haven't gotten an answer that I feel would be adequate up until now, because it isn't. I come from a country where also, to me, it's very personal. I come from a country where we actually are, as children, are encouraged to read 2 books when we're growing up. South Korea, and they actually encourage children to read the stories from the Talmud and the Torah. And that's been going on since the 70s. And the reason is because we always held this belief that within the Jewish faith, there is something to be learned, always. And one message that I remember as a child reading the stories from the Talmud and the Torah is that no matter what happens, you must hold your humanity well, because this is sacred. And it is sacred because it is from the Creator. I want all of you to please remember that statement today, that, in a sense, we all may be coming from a very, very different background, some of us more challenging than the other. But we're here today to also stand with those who have suffered a lot more, I'm sure a lot more than a lot of us here in the state of Israel. And we're also here today to stand with the people, the innocents of Palestine. And we also want to make it clear that this isn't an Israeli-Palestinian issue. More importantly, this is an issue where we have to identify who the terrorists are, and those terrorists are Hamas. And I'm sure many of you agree with me on this, is that either something has to be done about this, or unfortunately, we're going to be seeing a lot more of this. And I'm very honored to have our Hazara community members here today who can actually testify on that regard. So without further ado, I'd like to invite 3 speakers. The first one, the speaker, like a great personal friend that I got to know in the past few months. His name is Mr. Nachman Mostofsky. He's currently the executive director and the vice president of Amirah, and he has also spoken in our past Congressional Briefing a few months ago. So without further ado, please welcome Mr. Nachman Mostofsky. Nachman, sorry.
You hear me now?
Yep, you can get.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ewan. I greatly appreciate it. I'm sorry I can't be there with you today. Some of the people in the room actually know me, and they know that yesterday I celebrated one of my sons, made his bar mitzvah yesterday. So just getting to DC would have been very, very impossible to do. So I appreciate you guys being able to hook this up through Zoom. As Sion said, my name is Nachman Mostofsky, and I am the executive director and VP of Amirah, which is the only organization in the country with the express mission to teach and promote the spiritual, cultural, social, and communal values of traditional Torah true Judaism and the Torah for which they come, and to impart these values to the American Jewish community and to the entire United States of America. We believe that these values of Americanism, and that's where it was built from, that when understood, the high ethical and spiritual values of Judaism, the ancient faith of the Jewish people, the land of Israel, and the kingdom of Judea, teaches, demonstrate the compatibility of good nationalism and capitalism, and that when joined with religion and the belief in God, it can fulfill God's promises. With that said, I would like to thank everyone for coming. I would especially like to thank the Hazara Working Group, HinduACTion, and I know there's a Buddhist group, and I think an atheist group as well that is here today, and I'd like to thank them all for coming. From what I understand, there are either Congress members or Congress members' offices that have come. And again, thank you so much for coming, especially with what's going on in the world today. The rise, I mean, people were saying there was a rise of antisemitism in America. Now you can see it. You know, certain communities have virtually no history of anti-Semitism. The Hindus and the Hazaras in particular are a type of people that have for a very long time condemned all discrimination. And similarly to the Jewish people and other religious minorities, they also have experienced genocide in the past. I missed the name of the first speaker, and I'm sorry, but she spoke about some things that need to be, you know, I think talked about in particular. For starters, you know, a lot of ink has been spilled about Palestine, and you hear these chants on these college campuses, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Now, historically, the land of Israel that we know today has been controlled by many, many, many different people. When they say river to the sea, they don't mean from the river to the edge of Judea and Samaria, and then skip over a bunch of land, and then start on the eastern border of Gaza and go to the sea. They mean everything. They want Jews killed. And we now know that the moderate Palestinian Authority, as of last Friday, it was leaked, have an official document that they want for their, I guess, terrorist groups that they control to also go around killing Jews. This has absolutely nothing to do with land and everything to do with Jews. And I'll prove it. Before 1948, it was the British. Before 1917, it was the Ottomans. No Palestine. From 1291 to 1516, that was a long time, the Mamluks controlled that land. Still no Palestine. Okay, fine, you want to say from 1099 to 1291, the Christians weren't interested in giving the Palestinians, if they even exist, their own country? Okay, but before that, from 636 to 1099, it was controlled by Muslims, and still no Palestine. The Byzantines before them, no Palestine. Before them, the Romans, and before them, the Hellenists. It was the Romans who called that land Capitolia Palestina. It was to mock the Jews they had just removed from their homeland. Or because the Philistines, the Plishtim, controlled that little strip of land. They are today what we would call them the Phoenicians, not Arabs. And they were definitely not Muslims. That people predated Islam, and they were gone before Islam ever came. King David was the one who finally got rid of them, for the most part. It is so ridiculous that these people call themselves Palestinians, that anybody that knows Arabic would know that the sound is found in Hebrew, but not Arabic, which is why they go around making up this new thing that they have called themselves Philistine. But that makes absolutely no sense, because there was never a country or never a people named that. So they want to claim that they are related to the Plishtim, but they want to call themselves Palestine. It makes absolutely no sense. It is completely ahistoric. And the only thing that all of these groups have in common is that they want to kill Jews, which is why they have put their religious disputes with Iran to the side, and they have decided they're going to come together to do the favorite pastime: kill, rape, kidnap, murder, behead Jews. This is barbarism, and that has not been seen on this planet for probably 2,000 years. Some of what happened a few weeks ago would make the Nazis blush. And even the Nazis, when they did what they did, hid it from the world. They didn't go with GoPros, and they didn't take it on their cell phones and send pictures over WhatsApp to their parents, screaming, "I killed 10 Jews, I killed 10 Jews. Daddy, look, I just sent you pictures of I just killed 10 Jews." If you look at some of those videos, and I suggest you do not look at them, but if you have seen them, you'll notice something. 7, 8, 9, and 10-year-olds walking around the background with machetes and knives and guns. This is a culture that has to be destroyed. It's not just the Hamas. It's not just the People's Liberation for whatever they want to call themselves today. It's their culture. The culture that has been breeding in what I call Hamasistan. And now we know that it's also in Judea and Samaria. It needs to be wiped off the face of the planet, just like Nazism and the Imperial Japanese. We knew how to do it after World War II, and we have to know how to do it today. And for you religious people, you know, my son started putting on flag beads, and anyone that's been in an airport and in a Jewish name, you see Bushmen putting them on in the morning. They are black boxes that go in the arm and on the forehead. And in it are 4 chapters from the Bible. And I know you spoke about your friend Daniel Pearl. Daniel Pearl, a lot of people didn't know when he started screaming right before they, like the animals that they are, beheaded him. But he screamed the battle cry of Judaism. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear Israel, God is your God, God is one. That is one of the chapters that is inside of the flag release. But there's another one. And this one is the one that I would like to talk about. God says specifically in the Bible that, and remember, God is the one who created the earth, so this is all of his. He gets to decide who goes where. And when God has brought you into the land of the Canaanites, as I swore to you and to your forefathers, and I have given it to you. And then he goes on to say all the things that we're supposed to do in the land of Israel. This land is ours. We were the original people that were conquered and removed from our own land. You know, all these college kids talk about colonization. We were literally the first people, as far as I know, that were colonized. And it's always been about removing Jews from their homeland. This is a land that Jews pray 3 times a day at minimum. That does not include the prayers that we say after eating and many other times during the year. We've always had a dream of going back to that land. It's always been for us. It's always been ours. But, you know, the last time I spoke at this gathering, we were really speaking about a rise in anti-Semitism that was almost, it was seen but not seen. And some of you have heard from me about this before, but there are some new people here, so it bears repeating. When Jews speak about anti-Semitism, they usually speak about the statistics or bringing up studies that have been done on anti-Semitism. But I'm not going to do that. The world today is way past the point of studies and talk. I'm sure many of you have seen and heard much of this data before, and I'm sure it bores you just as much as it does me. And I'm sure you realize that not one of these studies and not one of these statistical data points does anything to change the acts of anti-Semitism. But let's talk about anti-Semitism itself. The evilness that it envelopes in society. It's a curious thing, anti-Semitism. It's unique amongst all forms of racism and bigotries. You know, we call it the canary in the coal mine for the moral decay of civilization. Almost every civilization that has attacked its Jews has very, very, very quickly started to decay. And why is that? And just an aside, the British had the same problem. They threw the Jews out. And it wasn't until Prime Minister Disraeli realized that it was almost at the exact same moment the Jews were thrown out of England, when he decided maybe we should let the Jews back, and they actually saved their society. Around the world, and even here in the United States, there are people harboring anti-Semitic beliefs which, you know, up until about 2 weeks ago, nobody actually was proud of them, but now, as we can see, our college campuses are filled with them. They're filled with the hatred of the Jewish people, not Israel, not Zionism. Not Zionism is racism. None of the stuff they've been spewing on college campuses for decades, trying to get away with still being anti-Semites. Now, they are full-fledged anti-Semites. And these racist beliefs are different than all other because they couch them in absurdities that no other racism or anti fill-in-the-blank has. So with that, I would like to just thank you all for coming and acknowledging that what is going on in Israel, in Europe, in America, throughout the world. I mean, there's very few places right now that are not having protests against Jews. And go look at the signs. The signs are calling for the killing of Jews. As a matter of fact, many of the people unfortunately killed on the 7th were actually post or anti-Zionists. They were Jews that promoted a lot of dialogue with Palestinians, specifically in Gaza. But these people didn't care about dialogue. They don't care about peace. They only care about dead Jews. And with that, I thank you so much all for coming, for recognizing and doing what you can to fight anti-Semitism. God bless you and God bless America.
Thank you, Nachman. For our next speaker, I'd like to invite attorney Richard Horowitz. He is an attorney focusing on the corporate security and international law. Prior to practicing law, he was a private investigator and is a former officer in the Israeli Defense Force. He has spoken on terrorism and related subjects in 20 countries and represents the International Association of Jewish Lawyers and Jurists at the United Nations. So with that, Attorney Horowitz.
Good afternoon. First, I'd like to say that nothing that took place on October 7th actually surprised me, other than the fact that Israel was surprised. I expected that if Hamas ever entered Israeli soil, it would do what it would do, and I expected that were that to happen, the reaction sooner or later would be to blame Israel or things that we've been seeing now. That's been taking place at Ivy League campuses or other protests. So that doesn't surprise me. What I want to focus on are two issues, one military and one legal. And I think these comments that I'll say will be very instructive in understanding, or helpful in understanding what is taking place right now. First, when it comes to the blast at the hospital in Gaza a few days ago, and within an hour or two, the media was repeating Hamas's claim that it was a rocket launched or a missile launched by Israel that landed on a hospital and 500 people were killed. How they knew within an hour or so, the number of people we don't know, but the media picked that up. Now, I knew from the moment I saw the blast, that fireball in the parking lot of the hospital, I knew it could not have been a missile from Israel. It had to be a failed rocket launched from Gaza, not too far from the hospital. Now, how did I know that? It's very simple. Everybody's heard of high explosives, right? And then there are high explosives, and of course there are low explosives. Now, I don't expect many people to know what this means, and there are people who have PhDs in this topic, but the basics are really easy. High explosives detonate, low explosives deflagrate. What does that mean? And one thing you should be aware of, when you hear commentators trying to make Israel or whatever country look bad because they used high explosives to detonate something, and they try to emphasize the word, or they emphasize the word high to make it more dramatic, you know the person is playing a game. because the higher the explosive, it's not the more immoral the army is. High explosives are what you see happening when something explodes. Like high explosives explode, just what you see in the movies or on the news sometimes. Those are high explosives. People routinely refer to them as explosives, but they're high explosives. What's a low explosive? A low explosive is a substance that if you put it on the table or on the ground and ignite it, it'll burn. It'll be a flash of light. It will explode only if it's encased. If it's put inside something that contains it, because its speed, the velocity of the blast is much less than a high explosive. Now this distinction is very important. The best example of a low explosive is the gunpowder in a bullet, because something explodes in that bullet to shoot the bullet forward. Something in the cartridge is full of gunpowder. You can't have a high explosive in the bullet, because if were you to shoot that bullet, then the gun would explode into your hand. You need a low explosive, which is not powerful enough to explode the gun, but it is powerful enough to shoot the bullet forward. So those are low explosives. Now, when you see that video of that blast in the parking lot, what you see is a fireball, right? That indicates that what took place there was not the detonation of a high explosive, which would generate an explosion. It indicates that what took place was the igniting of the rocket fuel in the rocket that fell, because the rocket fuel ignites, in other words, burns. The high explosive would explode, traditional sense explosion. But what we didn't see was any damage to the walls of the hospital. It exploded in the parking lot. We didn't see damage to the walls of the hospital. We didn't see any cars that were blown up. We saw cars that were ignited, that were burning, because that was a fireball. So we see from there that what detonated what exploded had to have been the rocket fuel from the rocket launched from Gazan territory. So that doesn't take much expertise to know. But the media kept referring to the Hamas claim. The New York Times this morning put in editor's note saying that it shouldn't have done that, it should have waited. And that's one point that I think people should keep in mind. The next point is a point of international law, that it was clear sooner or later Israel would be blamed for the disproportionate use of military force. Because I can't remember the last time that Israel wasn't blamed for the disproportionate use of military force. And what do people who are not pro-Israel always say? Well, look at the numbers. For every Israeli civilian killed, 10, 20, 40 times as many Gazan residents were killed. So look at the numbers. But the rule of international law dealing with this issue has nothing to do with numbers, not numerical parity. That's not what the rule says. Now, let me explain, let me read the rule to you.
Apologies, everybody. We in this room we have Congressman Shri Thanedar joining us today. I know he has a very, very busy schedule, but despite that, he came to join us. So I'd like to give him a quick time to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'll just be here for a few minutes and then I have another engagement to go to. But welcome to the United States Congress. I am the 5th Indian American congressperson in the U.S. Congress. For the first time, we've achieved 5 Indian Americans in U.S. Congress. And you know, my background is I'm an immigrant. I was 24 years old, living in poverty in India, and came here for study to get a PhD in chemistry. And the Mumbai consulate rejected my student visa 4 times before finally they approved it. You know, so I came here, got a PhD in chemistry, worked as a chemist, just a typical immigrant story, $20 in my pocket, a suitcase, that's how I came, like many of you could identify with that. And never thought that I will be in the United States Congress. Never thought I would be voting 18 times for Speaker of the House, which is what we just happened. But I represent Detroit and Michigan's 13th Congressional District. And I often joke that the only Indian American I know in my district is my wife. So we have a very diverse population, and I give a lot of credit to my constituents in Detroit. It's almost a 45% African American district, another 45% white, Hispanics, and they chose to choose someone like me, who doesn't look like them and who doesn't speak like them, and yet this is a community that has highest level of children's respiratory issues, women, death among infants. It's one of the, there's a lot of effects of the racism, the discrimination that you see in this district. And I, having grown up in poverty, I feel strongly connected with this community, and I want to do something, and that's why I'm in Congress, to fight for them. Fight for them for every day, voting rights, fight for them every day to ensure that these children living in these low-income communities get the same education as the richer suburbs. Every child, no matter where he or she lives in, must get the kind of education that they need to get where they need to get. Health care, I'm a proponent of universal health care, a single-payer health care system. So there's a lot that I'm here in Congress to do, but while I'm here, I also saw the attacks on Hinduism. I saw the Hinduphobia, I saw the hate, and one of the first things that I asked is that, what has Congress done to protect the religious freedom of many of these communities? And I was told there is none, there is no. So one of the first things I did as a new congressperson, against the advice of many of the more senior Congress members, that I formed the first Hindu, Buddhist, Jain, and Sikh caucus in the United States Congress. And I have bipartisan support. I have 26 members of Congress who have become members of my caucus just in 4 or 5 months that we are in. And we're going to fight. We're going to fight for religious freedom. We are not going to tolerate any kind of attacks on Hinduism or Sikhism. Every day we see in papers somewhere, the phobia, the hate, the bigotry. And we need to stand not only in each of our communities, but at the highest level in the United States Congress. And that's what I'm doing in the US Congress, fighting to ensure that we fight this phobia, this hate, and so that's one of the things I'm doing. The other thing that I've done, when I told you about my student visa, I'm sorry talking fast because I got to go someplace else. But when I went 4th time, my student visa was rejected in Mumbai consulate, and I had nothing new to present. Every time I give more data, they reject my visa. My counselor, her name was Virginia. And so 5th time, I had nothing new to give. So I took the same papers that she rejected on the 4th time and resubmitted those papers. And I go in the evening, they asked me for my passport. I said, why do you need my passport? They said, we can't give you a visa without a passport. And so I submitted my passport. I said, what, Miss Virginia changed her mind? And they said, no, she's gone to America for vacation. And someone else looked at your papers and they thought they were perfect. So, our immigration system is so broken. The high-tech businesses keep telling me that they need skilled workforce. People in their H-1B visas and green card, there's a huge backlog of green cards. It's becoming very stressful for professionals that we need. We need these professionals. Our businesses need those. American businesses need those to create more American jobs. And yet, we have such a hardship for these engineers, these skilled people, to be able to stay in this country, be able to contribute to our economy. And so I'm working on, one of my bills to anybody with an advanced degree, like a PhD, should be allowed to not have to go through the country quotas, not have to go through the green card process, but they should be able to get their green card much faster. So there's a number of bills I'm bringing in. I'm looking at this system. Currently, we don't quite have the appetite to do a full-blown, complete immigration reform, which is what we need. The greatness of this country is because of its immigrants. And we are moving away from that. And I want to go back and put that focus back on that we need to welcome immigrants to this country, and that does not take away American jobs. And so I want to focus on our process in terms of green cards and country quotas. I would like to see a day where country quotas go away completely. I want an immigration system that doesn't discriminate based on where people were born. I want a system where it encourages people, qualified people, engineers, scientists. I want to encourage entrepreneurship in our communities. So there's a lot that I want to do, and that's what I'm working on. I'm a new Congress member, and but I'm excited. I'm excited to be here. I've ran small businesses. I've been an entrepreneur, had success, achieved my American dream. I want to go help others achieve theirs. And the question here is that, do I have any words about what's going on in Israel? Certainly, loss of civilian life, whether it is Israeli civilian life or Palestinian civilian life, should not happen. That's something that's never desirable and never welcomed. And I was one of the first members of Congress to protest when Hamas, which is clearly a terrorist organization, that came in and attacked Israel. So, Hamas is not a militant organization. Hamas is not a resistance movement. They are just barbaric terrorists. There's no other way to describe it. And this is a time where we just can't just push them, and because they will regroup and come back and do these atrocities once again. That's what they will do. So, we need at this stage to eliminate them, eliminate Hamas from the face of this earth. We need to dismantle their military operations. We need to free the Palestinian people, the 2 million Palestinian people that live in Gaza. They need to be freed from these terrorist control of Gaza. So that is really what I feel. Now, there is a lot of talk about ceasefire, but I feel that it's premature. These Hamas terrorists have used the civilians, misused the civilians as a shield for them. And unfortunately, that's causing tremendous loss, which is so regrettable. Tremendous loss of lives of innocent people. But these innocent people, they need to have their future, they need to have their life, they need to have their human rights, and they need to be freed from the oppression of Hamas and basically exploitation Hamas is doing of these innocent civilians in Gaza.
Thank you,
Yes,
Congressman. Thank you, Congressman Shri Thanedar. It's a huge honor for us to have you here with us, and thank you for standing up for all the innocents. Thank you so much.
You
All right, we will now continue on with Attorney Horowitz's remarks. So please.
So now I'll continue with the interesting topic of international law. The issue that I was going to speak about was this rule of proportionality, or whether or not Israel uses disproportionate use of force, and what exactly does that mean? Where does that come from? So, Where it comes from is in a document that's attached to one of the Geneva Conventions, which says that this is the actual rule. The rule actually doesn't use the word proportionate or disproportionate, but here's what it says. What violates the convention is an attack which may be expected to cause incidental loss of civilian life, injury to civilians, damage to civilian objects, or a combination thereof, and here are the important words, which would be excessive in relation to the concrete and direct military advantage anticipated. Now, if I were to tell soldiers that this is the actual law, or tell anyone here, this is international law, does anybody think, based on this sentence, they would know what to do? Right? Does this sound easy to you to understand? In fact, the current UN Commissioner of Human Rights, about a year or so ago, said, in speaking about Israel's use of force during that particular operation, said the international law is clear, and then quoted this exact sentence. But you've heard this sentence. This sentence is not clear. How are you supposed to know what to do, and how are you supposed to know what this means? So, here is my explanation. The way the world is, there's nothing in international law that prohibits military operations if the military knows that civilians are going to get killed. Having said that, let me explain a little further. I mean, there's the International Court of Justice ruled on the issue of, in 1996, whether or not nuclear weapons are prohibited by international law. And it said, no, they're not. It did say nations should make a good faith effort to come up with some kind of convention to prohibit the use, which countries started signing in 2017. But if nuclear weapons aren't prohibited, the killing of civilians per se is not prohibited. The situation is as follows. Israel is often accused of targeting civilians. Now, the distinction has to be made between knowingly and intentionally. Very often in criminal statutes, the first word would be whoever, the second word would be something like willfully or maliciously or knowingly or intentionally, and a few others. That means a lot. This is a hypothetical that every lawyer has learned in law school. What if someone decides to kill B, and the method he chooses is to put a bomb aboard his luggage before B boards the airport, and the bomb goes off, killing A plus everybody else on board? Can A argue, I didn't intend to kill the other people, I only intended to kill A? I only intended to kill B, and the answer is, of course, not. Now, when I first heard that in law school, 30 years ago, it did occur to me how you've got to be a little off to think of that kind of a hypothetical. But it turns out that it's not a hypothetical, it's a real case, and the person was a little off. It's a real case that took place in the 1950s in Colorado. The 28-year-old wanted to kill his mother to inherit her assets. The method he chose was to put a bomb aboard in her suitcase, and when she boarded the plane, the whole plane exploded, and everybody on board was killed. So in murder, or street crime, or the regular crimes that we're accustomed to, it's the knowingly standard. In international law, it's the intentional standard. If you intentionally kill civilians, if you target civilians intentionally, not knowingly, because this rule that I read to you before says that the incidental civilian loss can't be excessive to the military advantage anticipated. Right? Now, how does anybody know what the military advantage anticipated relationship to the excessive use of force is? It's a concept. It's not numerical parity, because you always hear, look, so many Israelis were killed, and for every Israeli were killed, 40 Palestinians were killed. And that's numerical parity. Well, that doesn't make sense, because if that was the state of the law, of international law, then if the enemy killed 10 of your soldiers, you couldn't kill more than 10 of their soldiers. Or if Hamas killed 1,400 Israelis on Israel's soil, And Israel could go into Gaza and kill 1,400 Hamas residents, which obviously doesn't make any sense. So the issue is not whether civilians are killed. The issue in international law, which every country accepts, and no country is going to say it's illegal to kill civilians. Some commentators might say that, usually in the context of Israel, but no country will say that. Unfortunately, that's the state of affairs. But the number of civilians is not the crime of disproportionate killing of civilians. It has to be compared with the military advantage anticipated. And the way to do that is not to look at the damage of buildings and not to look at the number of people killed. The way to do that is to know what the military decision maker in that moment knew at the time he made that decision. And I can't spend much time on it now, I see the clock, but if you were to research when and where this rule of proportionality has been applied, you'll see it's always applied to Israel because Israel has to do what it has to do. But you will not find the same rule applied routinely anywhere else because many courts or international courts don't really know what it means, and sometimes courts have actually said that. So those are the two comments that I wanted to make. I hope they were helpful, and I suppose we'll be here for questions afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Attorney Horowitz. I wanted to now introduce Ms. Rahela Kaveer, who is actually the chairwoman of the World Hazara Council USA, and she is also a very well-known human rights advocate as well. So please welcome Ms. Rahela Kaveer.
Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. I'm very happy to have the opportunity to talk as a Hazara woman here at this Congressional Briefing. I would like to express my deep sympathy with the Jewish community whose people lost their life on the terrorist attack of October 7th by Hamas. In fact, as Hazara, we have much similar history with Jews and also Hindus. Our people and Hazara people have been the victims of the race and belief for at least a century in Afghanistan, as the Jewish people have for the past centuries. Terrorist groups are of the same nature and beliefs, whether they are Taliban or Hamas. The only thing they are about to kill, kidnap, and take hostage. Taliban were killing and beheading our people when they were out of the power, and now they are taking hostage at least the 50% of Afghan people who are the women. The same as Hamas kill and taken hostage the Israeli people, as well use their Palestine people as human sheep. As I'm talking here, the women in Afghanistan are prohibited from their essential rights, including education, occupation, and freedom of movements. Freedom of movement by Taliban. Women are imprisoned at home without any hope for the future. Any woman who have raised their voices for women's rights or freedom, they are arrested and tortured by Taliban regime. The situation on Hazara women is much worse because the Hazara women face to discrimination and persecution by triple reasons of their gender, ethnicity, and beliefs. The Hazara women have been chased, kidnapped, tortured, and killed by the Taliban in the past 2 years. The Hazaras have always been toward pro-democratic value and peace-loving nation in Afghanistan. We believe in human dignity and coexistence environment. The Jews and Hindus people who had been living in Hazara neighborhood in Afghanistan have always been respected and safe living and good neighbor to each other. Like Jewish and Hindus, Hazara people have also been persecuted by the Afghan state sponsored terror groups because of their ethnic belongings and religious belief. Hazara people are one of the 4 largest ethnic groups in Afghanistan, mainly Shia Muslim, but also have Sunni and Ismaili, Christian and atheist. Currently, the Hazara people are facing to a silent systematic genocide because of their ethnicity and religious, as they faced in the last decades and also in 1990s. The Hazara people have been targeted at least 300 terrorist attacks since 2011, mainly in their education centers, sport clubs, worship places or mosques, and public transportation. Currently, Hazara families are forced to leave their farms, lands, and their properties to Afghan nomads or Kuchis who are being supported by the Taliban. The Hazara are excluded from any political, social, and economic participation by the Taliban. Even the Hazara communities could not access humanitarian and international organizations' aid. Obviously, the impact of Taliban regime against women, Hazara people, and religious minorities destroy the sustainability in the future. What Taliban do in Afghanistan and hostage the people is the same that Hamas do in Gaza with Palestine people. This terrorist group uses the Palestinian people as a human shield. So we need to think about the Palestinian people who are also now the captive of the Hamas group. The Hamas attack on October 7th gave us a message that freedom and peace are on jeopardized. Hamas slaughtered and kidnapped the innocent civilian people of Israel, or like the Taliban have done in Afghanistan. Hamas also led a campaign of psychological war by producing hate against Israel and Jewish, as Taliban do against Hazara people. I'm concluded that no matter of whether it is Hamas or Taliban, their thought and notion are the same. They are against freedom, including freedom of religion, women's rights, and pluralism that are threatening the humanity and sustainability. To keep peace and sustainability, we should stand against any groups who produce hate, terror, and prohibiting people from their freedom of choice. We should stand together and fight for justice, peace, and freedom. Thank you.
So before I invite our next 2 speakers, I did want to thank Nisin Ruwindi for attending our hearing and being a cementing force in the partnerships and friendships between the Hindu and Jewish community. So thank you, Nisin Ruwindi. So our last 2 speakers are Dr. Rajshree Keisham and Mr. Sundar Iyer. Because we are kind of a little behind, I will ask both the speakers to stay within 5 minutes. Dr. Rajshree Keisham is the Vice President for the Association of Métis in America and a PhD in sociology, specializing in gender studies. She is a former UNESCO researcher and is a fervent advocate for social justice and empowering marginalized communities and inspiring positive social change. Please welcome Dr. Rajshree Keisham.
Kurum Jerry. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished members of Congress and esteemed guests. The gathering today is of profound importance. We are united by a shared purpose to address a matter that strikes at the core of our democratic values and the foundations of our great nation. There is a concerning rise of Asian hate, particularly incidents of Indian hate, Hinduphobia, and anti-Hindu bigotry across the United States and Canada. It is our duty to confront this wave of prejudice and hatred to ensure the rights and dignity of all citizens are protected, irrespective of their faith or creed. In Manipur, a state in the northeastern corner of India, violent clashes broke out on May 3, 2023. The conflict between two ethnic communities, the Meiteis and the Kukis, has continued for nearly 6 months. The senseless violence has cast a dark shadow over our beautiful state and taken countless lives of innocent civilians. Over 180 lives have been lost, more than 60,000 people have been displaced, and around 350 relief camps have been set up. It is crucial that we approach this situation with urgency, wisdom, and a commitment to peace and unity. In a classic example of Hinduphobia, the ethnic conflict between the Meitei and the Kukis has been projected as a religious one. Efforts have been made to portray this communal conflict in reductionist terms, projected to the world as a Hindu majority prosecuting the Christian minority. This oversimplification not only ignores the complex social fabric of Manipur, but also heightens tensions. The majority-minority debate should be examined in terms of the intersectionality of time, space, and context. For example, Christians are a minority in India, but they are a majority in the northeastern region of India. In Manipur, as per the 2011 India census, Hindus comprise 41.39% of the population, while Christians constitute 41.29%. The difference in population is only 0.10%. This is alarming when one considers the fact that the population of Hindus in Manipur, as per the 2001 census, was 62%. When the 2024 census comes out, Hindu could be at 30% or even less. Furthermore, within the Hindu community of Manipur, there are other ethnicities including Punjabis, Biharis, Tamilians, Nepalis, and more. Similarly, the Christian community is comprised of Nagas, Kukis, and also Meiteis. This diversity is not a source of division, but a testament to the harmonious coexistence that has characterized Manipur for generations. In recent time, there has been an alarming surge in attempt to exploit the Manipur conflict as a platform for propagating Hindu hate. This disturbing trend has found traction among certain factions within the Kuki Baptist community in the United States, who have strategically exploited religious sentiments to further their divisive agenda. What is even more concerning is the convergence of some radical Islamist groups in the United States who have appropriated and aligned themselves with this cause. They perceive this situation as a prime opportunity to tarnish the image of Hindus on a global scale. These groups have gone to great lengths to actively suppress the voice of the Meitei community, stifling the attempts to bring forth a balanced perspective. This suppression has taken various forms, including concerted efforts to form alliances, exclude our narratives, and conduct campaigns against Hindus. Attempts have been made to silence our voices on various global platforms. For instance, representatives of the Meitei community were invited to the Congressional Briefing on Violence in Manipur and Haryana on September 30 at the 2044 Rayburn Building in Washington, D.C. However, 2 days before the event, we were disinvited with an excuse that I quote, "Due to a mix-up with room reservations, our room has been changed and we can no longer accept more speakers." This response came from Mr. Alexander Gonzalez Hallbrain of the Indian American Muslim Council, who co-sponsored the Congressional Briefing. In an effort to simplify the ongoing crisis between two tribal communities merely as a religious clash and to malign the Hindu image, the real cause of the conflict has been completely ignored. Beneath the surface is a complex web of internecine conflict marked by violence, mistrust, and social-political tensions, and a deadly trifecta of militancy, narcotics, and illegal infiltration, which poses significant threats to India's national security. The Honorable Home Minister of India, Shri Amit Shah, conveyed to the Indian Parliament that political instability in Myanmar had prompted thousands of refugees to flee into Manipur across a porous border. The Meitei diaspora in the United States has devoted extensive effort to challenge the misrepresentation and disinformation propaganda wherein our community has been demonized because majority of us happens to be Hindus. We hope that Hinduphobia ends. We hope that the senseless violence in Manipur ends and look forward to a solution. It is our sincere aspiration that any existing biases or apprehensions towards Hindus are mitigated and that a constructive resolution is achieved, this would pave the way for the commencement of a process centered on healing, rejuvenation, and reconstruction in Manipur. Thank you everyone for giving us the opportunity to tell our story and for patiently listening to our narrative that has been occluded in silence since May. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajshree ji. And I did want to acknowledge the presence of Mark Ernst from Daryl Ice's office and other representatives who have joined us before, I believe, were from Brad Sherman's office and Raja Krishnamurthy's office. So please do convey that we appreciate all staffers who do show up at these briefings and convey the messages to our respective representatives. So our last speaker here is Sundar Iyer, and I will not spend too much time so that he has time to actually narrate the targeted Hinduphobia that he faced as a tech entrepreneur in California. So please welcome Sundar Iyer.
Thank you. Hey folks, first of all, thank you for having me here. Interestingly enough, I'm going to talk about a civil case. So a quick background, I've been a tech entrepreneur for the last 20 years, and I was named in what is now known as the caste discrimination case, where I was sued for allegedly discriminating against an employee based on caste. The question, of course, is why is this talk relevant in a meeting where we'll be talking about criminal issues, Hinduphobia, and of course, much more deeper issues. What I wanted to show you at the end of this sort of 4 to 5 minutes of the anecdote I want to share is the parallels between crimes in a civil case versus criminal. So quick background, I hired an employee who was actually a classmate of mine, and a year later in the company that I was doing, which was funded by Cisco, he wasn't performing, and a couple of years later with a bunch of complaints, he goes to what is known as the California Civil Rights Department, who later in 2020 filed a lawsuit saying that I discriminated against this gentleman, whom we'll call John Doe, on the basis of his caste. Now, when we talked to the Civil Rights Department, we said, why are you suing us? He said, well, John Doe is a Dalit, the lowest caste in India. We said, well, he's never applied for the job that you claim discrimination for. They couldn't care less. We even said that the person to whom all of these positions were granted, essentially every leadership position in my group, was also someone who identifies as a Dalit, the same lowest caste as the plaintiff on behalf of whom they're suing for. Now, I won't bore you with the details, but what's relevant is what the Civil Rights Department did. How do you create a case of discrimination, especially based on caste? Well, you first pick up one of your favorite punching bags, also known as Hinduism, and you first ascribe caste to Hinduism, which is what the California Civil Rights Department did. They went then on an essential tirade of violating the First Amendment by defining caste, comparing caste, and then, of course, assigning me a caste. Now, what's important here is I was interviewed by the Civil Rights Department, and I have been irreligious all of my life. There's 20 years of public data on my irreligion. They know it, they interviewed me, they couldn't care less. They went ahead, called me a Hindu, Brahmin, and then this sort of gave them the basis to create a caste discrimination case. Now, there's a lot more details about what the Civil Rights Department did in terms of essentially fabricating data. They call my group entirely Indian. Well, they have copious employment records of people of a diverse group. They even sued us for salary discrimination, even though John Doe was paid literally millions of dollars, millions more than me, even though I was the CEO of the company. Now, why is all of this relevant? It's relevant because the parallel between a civil case and criminal behavior, or pretty much anything bad we see on the planet, all comes down to one thing, and that's the truth. When the truth is beaten up, when there is disinformation, you can pretty much create any movement, whether what you see from students rising up against Israel in the United States, or Hinduphobia, or any other form of phobia. It's pretty easy to take a set of people who are mildly or mostly rational, feed them bad facts, and over a period of time, you can seek their emotions out and build a pretty sordid story, if you will. So where does this leave us? So in my own case, the state of California worked with an organization called Equality Labs, which is essentially anti-Hindu, anti-Semitic, by their own words and actions. Here is an organization that pretty much blames the Brahmins for everything in India. They've called Israel a rabbinical patriarchy. The Jews killed Jesus is used in the same way as the Brahmins tried to kill Buddha. There's so many parallels to essentially malicious claims being made to demonize a certain set of people. So long story short, I'm going to keep this really brief, is my journey was 20 years of tech entrepreneurship. It was a beautiful cocoon. You work with really brilliant people, you do great stuff. But today I'm on a new journey. Going through this experience allows me to hopefully connect with a lot more people so that we can essentially do the only thing that matters, which is make sure that the truth wins and make sure that good people win. So I'm glad for the invitation and happy to help in any way.
Thank you so much, Sundar Iyerji. And the reason we wanted Sundar to present this story is that the attack on communities and the silencing of voices comes from many different directions. It's not just physical intimidation or propaganda, it's subtle things that happen in the background. Now, before we break, I do want to call everybody up to the front. We will be having a joint declaration as a result of this coming together in the Congressional Briefing. Many of you have gotten a copy of it.
Here, so.
Oh, okay. So please, we do have our Congressman George Santos here. If you can just share a few words in this time for anti-Semitism, anti-Hindu bigotry, and how we stand by Israel, we would appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Good afternoon, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I'm George Santos from New York's 3rd Congressional District. I'm actually very proud to represent one of the largest Hindu communities in the United States on Long Island in Nassau County, and also the 3rd largest Jewish district in the United States. Two very large communities who, I guess, from what we are celebrating here today, the unity and standing up for bigotry, against bigotry, it's impressive, and I thank you all for being here together to do this. This shows union and an effort that brings everybody together after what we've seen since October 7 in Israel. And it's heartwarming to walk into a room of such a diverse group that understands the unity that we need today and how important it is to stand side by side with each other in these very trying times when we're fighting terror. And I couldn't be prouder to say I'm proud to represent and stand with both communities. I've always been a very strong advocate of diversity. Growing up in New York City and going to a public school in New York City, it is like a UN assembly every single morning. You don't see division, you don't see race, you don't see religion. All you see is your fellow colleagues. Can we be more like that in today's day and world, and can we be less like what we're seeing around the world today? That's my message. Unity and standing strong with one another. I want to thank you all for taking the time to put this effort together to show the rest of the world that there can be peace through strength and through unity. Two very different communities, two very different ethnic groups, two very different religions, yet we both stand together here in this room representing what's right. This is not about preference. This is about what's right and wrong. And what's happening to Israel is wrong. It's abhorrent. Thank you so much for putting this together. I appreciate it. And thank you for allowing me to come by. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate our representatives' work. These are very meaningful. We do have a vigil at Lafayette. Yes, so first we'll come together, we'll do a joint declaration. I would like everybody in the room to be present for that.
Joint declaration. Our multi-faith alliance stands with Israel in its war against terrorism and in defeating global jihad. We recognize Israel's right to defend itself and protect its citizens from indiscriminate violence and terrorism. Recognizes that anti-Zionism is a euphemism for antisemitism and denounce the campaign of stochastic terrorism, bullying, and intimidation against the Jewish community in America and Canada. Urges Congress to strengthen laws to protect Jewish staff and students against rising anti-Semitism on American campuses. Urge Congress to formally recognize Hinduphobia, formulate laws to counter growing anti-Hindu bigotry and targeted Hinduphobia. Recognizes the threat faced by the ethnic micro-minority Maitri Hindus and affirm our support for their right to fearlessly advocate for equality, well-being, and meaningful representation. Stands with the American Hindu and Sikh community against targeted attacks on Hindu and Sikh institutions, temples, and individuals in the United States and Canada. Hateful and racist legislations that seek to profile and target Hindus, like the now repealed SB 403 in California, must not be allowed to be repeated. Stands against and draws attention to the continuing genocide of the Hazaras at the hands of Taliban and its backers in Pakistan and requests immediate actions to recognize and stop the genocide. Urges Congress to develop comprehensive policies to enhance and guarantee the safety and security of Hindu, Sikh, Jewish, Hazara, and Yazidi communities on college campuses, at places of employment and places of worship, and recognize the need to create safe spaces for all.
In the crucible of history, struggles has long grappled with complex geopolitical conflicts, which have posed security and stability challenges and inflicted human sufferings. Due to the action of extremism, nonetheless, the prevalent sentiment among the religions populace remains one of the unwavering commitment to democratic values and dedicated pursuit of harmonious coexistence with their neighbors. I firmly and strongly condemn the attack of Hamas on Israel, the counter-terrorism efforts, and at the eradication of the terrorist organizations like Hamas and their like-minded organizations such as the Taliban and their counterpart supporters. Worldwide must take precedence with a vigilant focus on safeguarding innocent lives and the relentless pursuit of peace. Simultaneously, we repeated any endeavors involving collective punishment of Palestinians for the action of minority group and stress the paramount importance of upholding fundamental rights of all individuals, irrespective of their affiliation, while adhering to international law and the conventions. It is crucial to recognize that not all the Palestinians endorse or support action of Hamas. Many of those Palestinians are innocent Palestinian civilians bearing the brunt of these violent attacks and victims of Hamas-like terrorist groups. Conflicts fervently inspire a more peaceful future for their families. Furthermore, we must underscore the significant challenges faced by the Jewish communities, encompassing discrimination and persecution on a global scale. The Jewish population in Afghanistan, where I come from, once an integral part of the nation's diverse fabric, was compelled to leave their homeland due to safety concerns. Similarly, extremist and terrorist groups have perpetrated targeted attacks, forced eviction, and systematic removal of the Hindus and Sikh population in Afghanistan, marking a dark chapter in the country's history. The Hazara genocide in Afghanistan constitutes another tragic chapter that continued to unfold, with persistent acts of genocide and mass killings spanning over 130 years. The Hazara people have endured immense suffering dating back to 1800s, when over 62% of the Hazara populations fell victim of brutal massacres. Regrettably, targeted attacks on Hazara community persist, meeting the definition of genocide. Since 9/11, almost 300 targeted attacks have been documented on Hazara community in Afghanistan and Pakistan, affecting Hazara schools, hospitals, maternity wards, sports facilities, places of worship, and innocent Hazara civilians have been subjected to horrific violence, being pulled out of the buses and getting beheaded on the roadsides and on the highways. Throughout history, Hazara, Jewish, Hindu, and Sikh communities, once thriving and diverse, have encountered persecution and violence in Afghanistan and around the globe, compelling them to flee their ancestral homeland. This serves as a stark reminder of the destruction influences of extremism on a global scale. Various recognized groups, including Hamas and their like-minded organizations such as the gender apartheid regime controlling Afghanistan, the Taliban terrorist groups, and their supporters, pose substantial threat to the regional and global stability. Their reliance on violence, militant tactics, and radical ideologies can incite conflicts, insecurity, and act of terrorism. It's imperative for all the international community to unite in the battle against these threats, employing comprehensive counter-terrorism measures and addressing the root causes of extremism to foster more secure and peaceful world. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, let us extend our heartfelt sympathy and solidarity with the people of Israel and the victim families, and as well as the victim families of the targeted, of the victim families who have been victim of the terrorist groups in Palestine, along with all those who endured the revenge of violence. Together, we must hope for a resolution that help us in lasting peace for the region, affording all inhabitants the opportunity to live in security and harmony. The pursuit of peace in the region constitutes a universal imperative deserving the support and encouragement of all nations. As global citizens, it is our moral obligation to advocate for peace, justice, and protection of all human rights worldwide. We must support diplomatic endeavors, humanitarian aid, and international cooperation to bring an end to the conflicts, such as one between Hamas and Israel, while raising awareness is about the less known atrocities like the Hazara genocide is important for all. Thank you for your attention, and let us collaboratively strive for a better world and a better tomorrow together. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. I know it's been a bit hectic with the congressional schedules and all that, but we did achieve something very, very great in the sense that the speaker vote is still happening, and despite that, we still had offices visiting us here today. So